This is a very interesting and unique outreach of a local church. I'm sure that many of our listeners are wondering, what size is your church?
Our church has about 3,000 members, of which about half show up every Sunday.
Okay, so it's not a super large church. In other words, it's a church that basically utilizes the ministry of the people there to do quite an exceptional ministry. Well, having said that, I think another question that many of our listeners will have is simply this. What has made so many of your films successful financially at such a low production cost when compared to the movies that are produced out in Hollywood, for example? And along with that, why are your movies so successful when so many of your actors are not the big glamour types that people are used to, but rather just average people?
That's a great question. We believe that this is a ministry just like feeding the poor, just like helping the orphan and the widow, that this is not to build movie stars or egos. You know, we have a rule on our set that everyone there is important, that we treat each other with love, and that no one is a movie star, no matter if you're on the screen or behind the scenes. We don't do the movie star thing. So we see it as a ministry, and we want to tell stories of hope and redemption that draw people to faith in God. And so we use our money very wisely. We don't just throw money at problems. We pray about it first. And so our small budgets are still able to achieve a level of excellence because of how we handle it.
And Alex, I think that is a great, great testimony. That's really ours here at the American Pastors Network as well. Never a lot of money, but God has expanded greatly the pulpit that he has given us here via radio and then TV, not in the film type thing that you're doing, but what a pulpit. Wow, that's an amazing thing. Take another minute or two, and I'd like you to maybe share an example or two. The financial part, God is blessed, and that can be measured, and it's gotten the attention of those in Hollywood. They look and they say, how can this be done? Which you can say, God did it. But can you share an example or two, perhaps, of spiritual success, of maybe a life or so that have been changed by one of the movies? I know that probably more than one could stand out to you, and you could talk a long time, but just pick one or two, perhaps, that would be of an encouragement to our listeners about how God has taken what you have done and brought spiritual success in people's lives.
Absolutely. I'm going to tell you three examples very briefly. When Fireproof came out, there was a husband who was considering leaving his wife. They had marital trouble, and he had already taken his wedding ring off and put it in his glove compartment box in his car. And he wanted to go see a movie one Friday night. He was angry with his wife, so he went by himself. And the movie he chose was Fireproof, not realizing that it had a spiritual component to it. He sat in the theater. By the end of the film, he was weeping, and he realized he had not truly dedicated his marriage or his feelings to the Lord. Went out to his car, put his ring back on, went home and apologized to his wife for not being the spiritual leader, and they began to go to counseling and rededicated their marriage. And when Courageous came out, we had a number of men come to us and say that although they enjoyed watching the film as a form of entertainment, that they were convicted that they had not taken the steering wheel of spiritual leadership in their homes, and they began discipling their children instead of just trying to placate or entertain them all the time, and that God turned their hearts back to their kids. We heard numerous fathers say that. We just showed Overcomer to some test audiences, and there was one girl who had a deformity when she was born. This is not anything that she chose, and her friends had been bullying and making fun of her. She was very young, still in high school. And she came to us crying and said, for the first time, I realize I have been putting my identity in what others feel about me instead of the fact that God is in control of my life and he sits on the throne. I now recognize I must put my identity in what he says before anything else. So when you have those kind of responses, that's so encouraging for us because we begin to see the spiritual fruit of all our prayers.
Alex, those are tremendous examples, and I know from the standpoint of the identity part, I know that the younger generation in particular is struggling with identity and trying to find it in so many, many, many different things. But as you've said, and as we believe, only when we have found our identity in Jesus Christ can we find our identity and purpose for living. And that's what your movie's all about.